hands if you know that Jesus isn't worthy.
Everybody lift your hands if you know that Jesus is worthy.
Lift your hands, Jesus is worthy. Open up, let's give.
Open up and give a praise. Let's do it in the hurt.
If you love him, let's glory.
If you love him, let's glorify him.
Oh, glorify him. Say rejoice. Say. Somebody scream. Let the people look on. Let the people look on. By you, will. Say, oh, thy Lord, I will rejoice and glad. This is the day. This is the day that the Lord has made. Somebody say.
See peace come, not like pray when you feel peaceful. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so
I'm still alive cause you saved me. Once again, G.O.D. Time after time, you the only.
hey family, we are here for another episode, installment, what have you, of Heart-to-Heart, which is our conversation series that we have at Heart Church. The goal is really to be able to extend the conversation that on Sunday mornings we talking one person out to many and they don't have a chance to respond. And today we are hoping that we can not only just pull in multiple perspectives on the topic, but we also want you to comment. We also want you to let us know what you think below. And so that is the goal, and we want you to engage. If you will, for a quick second, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe on this page. Share it with somebody who you think could be blessed with the content. And even if you are holding and reserving your share in your back pocket because you want to see how it goes, we hope that you will release it by the end of this video.
Let it go.
And make sure that you share this with somebody. We already prayed and everything like that, so I'm just going to introduce the people who are with me. They're no strangers. I have to my far right Minister KJ Staten. Man, Heart Church is one and only. I mean, sometimes it really do be like that. Like, both of y'all are soldiers in the army of the Lord, to be honest with you. Don't think we can get through a Sunday without these two. And then to my immediate right is the incomparable Erica Fenner, Sister Erica Fenner, soon to be. Oh, I'm gonna leave you alone on that. I ain't gonna mess with your collar. I'm good. I'm not gonna. Yeah, because you know, old school church, they call you for everything. Okay.
Minister, Reverend.
Yeah, they'll be like, oh, I see some on you.
If you're walking in out the
Right. We ain't gonna do all that. And so we at Heart Church have been in the middle of a series called The Math Ain't Mathin'. And really the heart of the series has been around trying to get our mind around what God is doing, because sometimes it just don't add up. And so when we are going left and feeling like everything is going right, when we're going up and feeling like everything is going down, and can't help but to scratch our heads and be like, God, what is going on? The math ain't mathin'. And really, the whole crux of it is knowing that God is sovereign. That even though we don't know what He's doing, we know that He's doing something. And as we look and getting to the topic for today, as we look across the climate of our country, the math ain't mathin'. I don't know. Right, not even a little bit. A lot has happened, specifically in the political climate. And that's what we want to touch on today. I don't think we come up with a title for the episode. It'll be up by the time y'all see it. But we really want to just touch on really what's on the hearts and minds of many in our country right now around the political changes. As many of you all know, definitely by the time this airs, that President Joe Biden has stepped out of the process. He is no longer the Democratic candidate for the Democratic Party. Excuse me. He's no longer the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. And he has endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. Yeah. At this point, she has pretty much gotten all of the verbal confirmations from most of the delegates in the state. So it's looking like she will, unless something crazy happens, that she will be the new nominee for the Democratic Party. And so she's at the top of the ticket going against Donald Trump. And it is shaking some things up, man, literally in a couple of days. And so to get the conversation started, I kind of want to just toss out to you all. It looks like not only just verbally, but also monetarily, that Kamala has been able to raise over $100 million within a 24 to 48 hour period.
Yeah. Wow.
When at a time, I don't know what you all's opinions been, but at a time where it seemed like the Democratic Party was floundering, people weren't sure where they wanted to put their support behind. It looked like money wasn't flowing in, and that was part of the reason why President Biden might have stepped down. So now that the coffers are opening up and people are back on social media, what's y'all's feelings and takes and things about how this political climate is going to be shifting over the next month or so?
Man.
I'm a political junkie, so like
Oh, you live on the news channel. You stay with a singer at the bottom of your TV.
Do. I fall asleep watching MSNBC clips from the day. So that is like my nerd out. Is politics. You know, I think for me, I am hopeful because the Democratic Party united so quickly behind Kamala or Vice President Kamala Harris. And like there were all these rumors of like chaos, and the Democratic National Convention is going to be chaotic, and delegates are going to be getting into fights on the floor. And it was more so just like President Biden was like, I have left to serve, y'all. I am no longer seeking re-election. I'm endorsing not only the first female vice president, the first female vice president of color, who will now be the first female presidential nominee of color. So if for no other reason, I think of all the unprecedented times we've lived through recently of like COVID and the prior president and an insurrection, like this is an unprecedented time.
That's
I can
good.
Get behind.
Yeah.
Like I can be excited about this one.
Acknowledging the history of it.
If for no other reason, you know, like we were all alive for Barack Obama and like the excitement around that of like, yes, we can. And then the sharp left that came after that of like America pretty much being like, okay, we've had this black man for 8 years. Let's like go to the complete opposite end of it. So now like to see history being made again is exciting, but I'm also just praying for our country as a whole because it's such a divisive time. So I'm excited, I'm praying. And whatever the outcome is, I'm excited to see God's hand in all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think it's exciting, of course. It's exciting for a couple of reasons. Because I'm a political junkie too.
Okay.
Right? So I
didn't know this about you all.
Yeah,
I start sending y'all
I spend more time. I spend more time watching politics than I do pretty much anything else.
Culture and stuff.
I'm on YouTube all day.
Yeah, I know more about politics than I do about most of anything else happening right now.
Wow.
In general, I'm not a Netflixer. I'm not a Huluer. I'm a YouTube recap.
Wow.
And I am into podcasts.
That's dope.
That's into all that. So it is huge. It also lets me know, just from a practical stance, just how fearful people had been about what was to come, right? Like just not necessarily knowing and then seeing all the numbers. It was this particular election. We say it every time there's an election that this is an election that is like another. But you got to think about maybe the last 10 years of our lives that we have seen so many random weird ceilings being burst,
Right.
so many, different changes happening within our lifetime that will go down in history as being the first
Right.
of having ever happened. You talk
Yeah.
about Supreme Court cases, you're talking about,
Insurrections.
all those different things that
Prior
have
presidents
taken
being
place
convicted of crimes.
not happening, and to just see, I get it, right? All those things are happening. This is the first time ever. So for her, it's another ceiling being burst.
Right.
I think she's brought a level of energy back into this race that obviously is being shown through the money,
Right.
being shown through endorsements, and I am super big on seeing President Biden, tip his hat. I thought it was really cool seeing him the other day. It might have been yesterday or today or yesterday, where she was making a speech and they had him on live listening in because he couldn't be there.
When he was
and
Delaware.
he was like, I got your back, kid. And though she's not a child, but it lets you know the type of relationship that maybe they've been able to garner through, this particular process for them.
Right.
So it's exciting to see a baton being handed in this instance.
Yeah.
Yep.
So before we get too deep into it, because y'all are political junkies and everything like that, we want to make sure that we not only are observers of the political process but participators
Correct.
in it, right? And so I'm doing my little plug right now
Yeah.
that I pray and hope, and if you have not, you still have some time to go get registered in your area. Make sure that you're registered. I think you can even check at the DMV to see if you're registered as well. So it's like literally. And then if you've been registered, make sure you actually make a plan to go vote, whether you're doing, absentee ballots, whether you're doing
Early voting, which is great.
which is great.
Be familiar of where your precinct is. Make sure you're registered to vote. And it's not just about national. Like, so many times, the local elections get overlooked.
Oh, so
they're
for
sure.
your school boards.
Yeah.
They're
Police, sheriff and stuff like that. Yeah.
They're whether it's mayors, they're there's people who are going
Your
to
school
have
boards.
some kind of impact or some kind of decision in what our children are learning. So it's not just about the president, it's about your senator, your congressman, your state representatives, your local representatives. So vote. Like, yes, vote nationally, but so much of our lives are impacted by the local government.
Absolutely.
More times than not.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More times than not.
So
Judges.
Okay,
that's the one right now for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so this is we always try to, as much as possible, I think the founding fathers had an intention around separating church and state, but we know that the two bleed all the time, right? And then especially now in many of the parties' stances have bled into their beliefs, right? And so they stand on belief in order for their stances, right? And on both sides, right? So there's this complex of morality versus legality or whatever, right? So it's like, hey, if we can make it illegal, does that automatically make it moral? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I just kind of want to pick y'all's brains a little bit about that, navigating these policies and stuff like that. Is it kind of as for me and my home, this is what we're going to do? Or is it worth us fighting for the things that we believe in and the laws that would say certain things? Before, as you were marinating on that, one of the things that I struggle with as a pastor is where I should fall with certain things. Yeah. Should I stand up and be like, this is not what we stand for, this is not what we do? I definitely could give people guidance and deference if I have one-on-ones with them, but I'm wondering if I should have hard stances on things. Because we serve a God who I believe gives us free will.
Very true.
And so should I help to legalize things that would keep free will from happening, even if I'm against that particular thing? So let's say, and I'm not going to give a stance either way, but let's talk about, let's just use abortion as an example. Should, as a pastor, if you believe that is God's intent for you to not have an abortion, should you stand on the table and being like, yo, we need to join with whatever party is against abortion? Or do you fight for people to have choice? And then if they ever came to you wondering what choice they should make, then that's when you insert it, right? But you don't want to legalize their decision to not be able to make that choice because God gives us free will.
Yeah.
So I'm just giving you some theological like wrestling that I tend to do. But we do see that. So where do you all fall in that? Is it like stand up and fight for what you believe and go with that party that is aligning specifically to your belief system, or is it your belief system and you're going to leave policy towards things that are for common good, greater good, people being able to have choice? Is that something you struggle with picking your candidates, or is it something that's really easy for you?
So for me, I think that it becomes a little bit difficult to throw faith in that space of, gavel down to the table.
Right.
I think that there are some just things that are right and wrong as it relates to, what you do and how you live your life, and especially how that impacts those around you, how it impacts, the community that you live within. There are just certain things that laws make sense to have in place. Then we start to get into those spaces and places where, for instance, if you use the example of abortion, sometimes we get into the weeds, or we begin to get muddied in that conversation because I don't enter that hospital room, or I don't enter that space with that mother who might be a single parent, who might be already living in an impoverished situation, who has no support, who already has all these different components going on. And I do have a thought and a stance on that, but I think that thought and that stance directs my life, and it will direct my family's plight as it relates to how we move, right? But I don't know if that means that revelation I have received is for the masses versus that's the revelation, me as a priest, how I run my household, right? I also learned this little, example that someone taught me in school some years ago, and they were talking about how, let's just imagine we have this really busy intersection, and you and all three of us have a different perspective on how we believe the intersection would be run more smoothly, right? There's cars running and ripping everywhere. You might say, well, all the traffic needs to go from the left to the right. You say, well, all traffic needs to go from the east to the west, or whatever the case may be. And because you believe you have a certain stance that the traffic's going to run better, you have a different stance. I do. Instead of coming together to figure out maybe here's how we can make traffic run more smoothly, you come out into the street in the middle of the intersection with a bomb. And you blow the street up because you believe you know the best way to run traffic, but you didn't take into consideration all the lives or calamity or damage you caused by blowing the intersection up. I think that's how we enter these faith spaces sometimes, in these thought process, these ideologies with, I believe I have the right answer. Maybe you do, but how you enter that space could potentially cause more damage than the damage that you believe you're seeing is taking place by the traffic running how it is. And I think if we enter these spaces and conversations with more care and consideration for others, despite the traffic running contrary to what we believe it should run, we might be better off.
Right.
Unfortunately, people use politics, policy, court, to blow the intersection up. But they don't think about the damage that's being left behind.
Right.
And I don't think God is pleased with that.
Right.
I agree.
But yeah, so, I would have to say I think that we have to enter those spaces a little bit more considerate of others, even if they don't believe the same way we do.
Agree. What about you, Erica? Is it like...
What Kaytree said.
Right. No, I feel you because, and I guess how I want to pose it to you is... There's a lot of things that are riding. So before, when you made the comment about local and how important that is, it is very important. I think somehow, and y'all let me know if you feel differently, I feel like somehow the federal scene has been making sweeping, like whether it's through executive orders or through somehow like the judicial, the judicial system, the Supreme Court. It's like these sweeping things where now the federal election does play a huge part in like sweeping, policy and laws being happening and everything like that. So as a Black woman, as a professional worker, as somebody who is very much in the church, but also in this, like, when you start to think about the stuff that you're going to stand on the table for, is it something that you feel like you have to? Is it preference? Is it like, if I don't do something or get rally people around, then like, these major things could have a real impact on my life? Like, where do you fall? Are you fighting for yourself? Are you fighting for others?
I'm definitely
Do you
fighting
feel
for
like you have to
others.
fight, or just kind of where
Yeah.
you fall in that?
So in my family, like, we had this conversation a while ago of like, there are policies under one particular party where if we voted by those policies, like, we would benefit, like, financially, because we're middle class, like, we would benefit,
Right.
but at what cost? And like, what world do I want to raise my future children in? Do I want to raise my children to believe that, like, what God said of what you do to the least of these you do unto me? Or do I want to raise them of, oh, well, it's about me, and my paycheck and my tax break and
Right.
like how I can get ahead. And I think that that's an abomination. So I'm going to vote against it because the only people who should have the right to be married are the people who have the same like sexual orientation as me and me. And so to answer your question, like, I believe that I am here to fight for people to live a life of dignity.
Right.
And telling someone what they can and can't do with their body, in my opinion, is not the role of government. I believe that, like, on Judgment Day, I've got to stand and atone for the decisions that I made. I have to stand and atone for the fights that I took up, for the cross that I bore, that I chose to bear. And when I vote, it's not about me. Like, I vote because I want clean air. Like, the next war is not going to be about it's not going to be about tanks. It's going to be about water and energy. I vote because I want my children to have the freedom to read any book that they want, to be educated, even if it's a book that I think is horrible. If it opens their mind to a different world, and I vote because I want them to have more opportunities and have more, be more worldly. So who I choose to vote for is who I may not believe in everything that they support. I am not a one issue voter. I am more of when I look at the world, what is the world I want to see? Do I want to see a world of like hope and equity? It's not just about equality, but like equity. Like, yes, pull yourself by the bootstraps, but I want everyone to have boots. So I'm going to vote for the family, for the party where like they are focused on, I don't feel cheated by other people having opportunity.
Right.
So, I, even though I would consider myself conservative because of like my faith and my beliefs, I do not typically align with people who also feel that way, because I know that it's so much bigger than me. It's so much bigger than the life I want to live. It's about the life that I believe everyone should be entitled to live.
So that's so good. And I want to piggyback off what you just said, because it leads me to something that you said off camera.
And I want to say something about that too.
Okay. All right. Well, if you want to talk specifically about what you said, because I was going to turn the corner to the role of government versus the church. And because some of the things you listed out probably could be a part. Yeah. So I was going to get into that. So I don't know if you were into that. Yeah.
I did want to place a sticky note on something you said, at how quick I think, especially generationally, how we perceive, right? And I can imagine someone hearing you say, using the word worldly, and it's always been in the faith space, tied to things that are super negative, right? And I think that in your heart, what you desire is for your children to be well-rounded,
and
like
exposed, literally see the world,
and to see the world. And I think that's what we run into a lot also, right? Is we get into our own spheres, our own world, and our own little bubble, and that's all that matters. And I think that matters, that we do raise our children in a space or a place or in an environment where they are able to be exposed so that no matter where they go. I got into it with a pastor not too long ago. I was telling you about on social media, who is a huge pastor in the United States. And we were going back and forth. He went to the DMs. It got like really, and it was about, I'll tell you about it. but it literally was, I got checked by the Holy Spirit because I was coming off a little But I understood that, where they were coming from. But a lot of it was, they were fearful of children being exposed. But I also believe that having parents at home who are invested in their children's well-being and covering them in prayer and also having open and honest conversations about what they are seeing and what they are experiencing, I think is super helpful in that you rear your child, you control, the environment that your child grows up in. So just because they are exposed doesn't necessarily mean that they, are going to go and grapple on anything that they see. But to then allow them to grow up in this space, never expose them to anything, and then send them out into a world that they've never experienced or had an opportunity to learn anything about because you've held them so tight.
Right.
I don't know. I think we run into,
we went to college with those kids, and it didn't turn out well.
So that's interesting that you brought that up, because this is what I believe that God modeled for us with the children of Israel when they were going into certain territories. He didn't keep them out of the territories. He was
so
like,
good.
he took them into Canaan. He was like, you're going to be around the Jebusites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, all the ites was going to be in there. But he told them how to act accordingly while they were there. And so he gave them walking instructions, but he didn't keep them just in the wilderness by themselves. Like, I don't want y'all to see anything but what I expose you to. The other thing that came up to me around the exposure is that when you are willing to expose, be exposed to things, that thing also gets exposed to you. And so for instance, like any space that you are willing to allow your child to walk into so that they get exposed to it, that space also now is exposed to who your child is. And a lot of times, especially for Black and brown people, not only do we not get access to spaces that we can be exposed to, but those spaces don't get exposed to us. And so you might be missing out on some of the most brilliant minds. You might be missing out on some of the things. And so I think the courage that it takes to send your child or yourself out to new territory has a lot to say about, this is worth fighting for, because I believe that God is going to walk with me into these new territories. And
be the light.
Exactly. And I think that's where it kind of gets blown out of proportion. I feel like sometimes people think that you're fighting for the decision when it sounds like you're saying, Erica, you're fighting for the right to decide.
To make the choice.
To decide. And not just around abortion or whatever, but just being able to do that. And so I'll say my piece, and then I would love for you all to get, like, when we talk about what the church's role is versus the government's role. We see so many church leaders and people who just are parishioners who are trying to infiltrate politics with God and being like, I take this stance because I believe this is what Jesus wants. I believe this is what God wants. We all know that it seems like we have different versions of Jesus depending on which one you grew up with and what his stance with. I've had the opportunity to wrestle with that in Uptick, which is the group that we've been a part of, to be able to share liberation theology with some people and being like, wow, we never tell the story of the children of Israel leaving Egypt and believing that really has something to do with freeing people. They believe that that's like walking out of sin into the freedom of salvation. So it's like, never. So I say that to say that where is the church's role in trying to bring about some of the things that we are saying that we want to fight for, that we want to see, that we believe are God ordained? You know what I mean? Should we vote for the people to have that choice, or should we preach about people having that choice? Should we open up the Bible, or should we open up, Executive Order 36745 to help people start to make these decisions? You know what I mean? For me, I think that our role as the church. Well, I'm not gonna give my answer yet. I was gonna give it. I was gonna give it, but I actually want to hear from y'all. What are your thoughts around that churches versus where do you land on that?
Because I feel like yours is. I'm not gonna want to follow yours. I believe that at the end of the day, I can hate the sin and love the sinner. And I think that so many people forget that. Like, I can say, I know that this isn't right, but let me tell you, I also know that I'm not perfect. I also know that I fall short every day, and God loves me anyway. And I think that if we as believers directed people more towards the love of Christ and the salvation and the redemption, instead of like sending everyone to hell. Like, my dad always says, I don't have a heaven or hell to put you in. Like, I'm not here to send you anywhere.
Right.
I'm here to show you love, to show you that my faith through how I live my life, and direct you towards that. But at the end of the day, I can't send you anywhere. Like,
Right.
no law that's passed, no conversation that's had. Like, I don't have the power to send anyone anywhere. What I have the power to do is show people that in every decision and every way we fall short, and anything that we deal with when life is life, and like, God is there.
Yeah.
And like that, I believe that if in some of these situations, if people in the church showed love more than they showed condemnation, there would be a lot more people who are willing and ready to accept Christ. So I don't know if that.
No, it's getting to it. So the only thing I would push you in further to say, no, you're good, to say, like, okay, so if love is the foundation, love's the basis, where do you stop worrying about preaching love and start picking? Well, I guess it's not fair to say that you got to stop doing one to start doing another, but where do you feel like, okay, this is no longer the job of the church, this is now the job of the state?
Okay,
you know
I got
what I mean?
you. I
Yeah,
got you.
like, where's your
Yeah.
threshold at?
I think it's a both and.
Okay.
I think that, everyone wants to be anti-socialism, but I do believe that it is a job of the government to ensure that when I have children one day and I need health care, that me being a mother is not a pre-existing condition.
Right.
That I have access to health care, that my grandmother, who is a cancer survivor, can't be denied health care as a pre-existing condition of beating cancer, or my uncle who's fighting leukemia now can't be denied later because he got a bone marrow transplant. And so things like that, like, I do believe that government has a very big role to play in all of that.
Right.
I do believe that it is not on the church to provide health care for people, but I also believe that we can't expect government to do everything, right? Like, we can't expect the government to be the end all be all of like abortion or all of that. It's okay. We as a church, right? If we have young mothers or young people in our church, are we supporting and finding ways to provide resources? Because yes, there is a healthcare part to it, but there's also a resource part. There's also, if you've survived a traumatic event, like, the thought of being a mother is overwhelming. Like, I absolutely cannot. So I think, not me personally, I can't wait to have children. But I think that it is a yes and. Like, yes, the government should be here to support us, to provide for us. Yes, we should be able to like count on them, but it shouldn't all be about that. Like, whether it's as a community, as a church, so be it. There are things that we should be doing to take care of God's people.
Yeah, for sure.
That's good. I love it. That's so good.
I would have to say,
so good.
I am a stickler about sharing the love of God. And one thing that I think a lot of leaders who might be a bit more forceful or direct stance-wise will say, but he's both the lion and the lamb, right?
Yeah.
And so I get that. But in both of those, there is love expressed, right? In the different ways, two sides of the coin. I think that the church has somehow flipped its responsibility, its role, which is, I think that God designed us to be an answer. But I think that the church, because we have gone into the four walls of the building, and now we want all the people to come to us, that we have lost this urgency and lost this zeal to go out and to compel, right? So we've skipped the compelling, or the trying to bring people into the house, and we're like, hey, well, because I believe this is a sin, from what I understand of the text, from my perspective, and my relationship and my revelation, I believe this is a situation that all those who follow or serve, or want to be, a part of the body of Christ should follow this particular stance. I don't know if that's the way that we should approach politics, though, because I think the political system is life, liberty, and justice for all. And it's impossible for it to be life, liberty, and justice for all if policies are being created that demonize, that stifle the growth of certain communities, that ostracize or deal harshly with marginalized communities, or different things of that nature. I just feel at this point, the way that I approach politics and faith is I don't want to put on the shoulders of the government to do what God called me to do. He called me to minister. He called me to love on the sick. He called me to be, someone who could cover, pray for, give counsel to. Based off my relationship with him, I love on others out of the overflow of love I received from him. Unfortunately, I think there are a lot of churches and a lot of leaders who are thinking that they are taking a stance for God, but then manipulating that perspective to say, now I also want everybody, whether they believe or not, to follow the same course, right? I just don't think that's our responsibility in the faith to make everybody be, right? It's our responsibility to share and to compel, but it's not our responsibility to whip people into salvation, because then I believe what we begin to do is fear people into faith, right? And if you fear people into faith, you'll find that a lot of people will fear the condemnation, or they'll fear the judgment, or they will fear hell, versus falling in love with who he is and what he's done and how he's provided and in what ways he's made and how he's opened the door of salvation to us for us to be free from life of sin and hell and and all that. So I think that if we could move the pendulum back from being so condemning and so harsh on what we believe the government's place should be, if we did our work a little bit more, did our work a bit better, if we went out into these streets and shared, I think we would be in a better off place, man. It's difficult for me to see sometimes leaders say God said, right? And sometimes it might be just a revelation again for them.
I think because before I pass it over back to you, not pass over to you because you're like hosting it. So
no, you literally you
one
in the
of the
middle.
things, two things that come to mind is like I personally believe that if churches spent more time teaching their members, their flock, God's word, so that they could understand it for themselves, and so that apologetics wasn't becoming like this lost way of evangelism, that we would be in a different place. Because there are things where I'm like, if you read the Bible and you knew it for yourself, this wouldn't look right for you. Like this wouldn't look right. So I think that like if there was more like equipping people to really know the word for themselves and know Jesus for themselves, they wouldn't be comparing politicians to Jesus. Like, I don't care what side you are on, left, right, center. I'm not comparing any politician to, like, the Son of God. Because there is one Son of God and one Son of God only.
Absolutely.
And they're not in politics.
No. Absolutely.
And I think the other part of that, because to go back to, like, the church and the state and separating, I am a believer of, like, if it happens today under Christian politics or politicians, who's to say that if this is a precedent being followed, if there is one day someone of a different faith who is nominated and becomes our who's to say that they can't now say, well, because when I didn't believe in what you believed in, you forced me to live by it, and now that I'm president, here's what we're going to do. So I think that like that's the other part that people sometimes get lost in, is like, it isn't about like what you believe is right. it's not about like what you believe is best. It's about
greater
what
good.
is best for us collectively and as a country. And if we are a country who says that we believe in life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and freedom of religion, then we like everything that we do needs to be in support of that.
Absolutely, and that's real. I think so here's my thing on to your point, Erica, around kind of like the role. So one is that I think that you can have a God conscious, you can have a Christ centered understanding Christology in your faith that puts Christ at the center of your faith. And if you do that, then you know that Christ does have something to say about what's happening around, right?
For sure.
And so in one way, he did want to meet the law. So he's like, okay, pay unto Caesar what's due to Caesar. And then in another way, there are these like social laws that are always at play that may not even be a part of the government or the legal system, but it's kind of like when he flipped the tables, right? Like he did that because it was according to the Mosaic law. It wasn't against the Mosaic law for what the religious leaders were doing. They basically were overcharging people for their sacrifices.
Right.
So since people would pilgrimage to Jerusalem to come to the temple to offer sacrifices, they didn't carry the animals with them. So they would go there and they would purchase the animals for sacrifice. And they knew that. The religious leaders knew that. So they started overcharging them in the temple for the animals so they can make their religious sacrifices. And that's what was
Capitalism.
pissing Jesus off. He was like, yo, this is crazy. Like, what are y'all doing? And so even though it wasn't unlawful, it was immoral. And so you see him holding up that moral standard of like, this is wrong, even though technically it's not wrong because you are still adhering to, you've left the spirit of the law, even though you're following the letter of the law, right? And so I do think that it is incumbent upon us who call ourselves Jesus followers outside of church to be like, okay, I have a Christ conscious, so let me evaluate the things that are happening around me to see not necessarily is it lawful, but is it right or wrong morally? You know what I mean? Yeah, it may be legal for you to leave that person out on the street, but should you? You know what I mean?
For sure.
And so that should guide us through our lives, through our politics, through our policy, you know, what we fight for. I definitely think that should guide us in that way. However, what I don't want to see is the church start to pick up the responsibility of the government in the sense where the church has to be all things to all people, right? And so I think we can pick up maybe where the government leaves off at. So if your health insurance even is inadequate and we gotta kick in and hopefully get another $5,000 to help out. Like, yes, let's help it, but let's not make the church the healthcare system and not fight for adequate healthcare for tax-paying individuals. Right? You know what I mean? Like, let's make sure that we are actually holding the government accountable in our voting and in our policy pushing, but let's not make the church have to do that. Like, let's be a part of the people where we come to church to be in community, to gain understanding, to be able to shape ourselves and our lives so that we can help shape the hearts and the lives of other people. And as we do that, then my thing is like, to your point, Erica, you don't have to beat people into submission. You could be like, you know, hopefully as you change, then you can spark change in the way that you go about treating people. I think what would cause more change especially in politics, is if there was a handful of Republicans and a handful of Democrats that actually displayed the fruits of the Spirit on the floor.
All the time.
You know what I mean? Like, or if you even got a
Yeah.
sense that they really did want to try to come together. If they were arguing points, but in an effort to try to come up with a bill versus just arguing for the sake of being able to look like I am super Republican, super Democrat, so that you can vote me back in on my next term.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
then like send out fundraising emails.
Yeah, because you're looking for
confrontation.
a spotlight. You're looking for you know, you're looking to be on C-SPAN or CNN to say something crazy that people get to know you. And now, and so I say that to say that if people were to take on like fruits of the Spirit in the way that they go about doing politics, in the way they go about doing social activity, even though it's not happening in the church, we would see more of the change that we hope to see. KJ, to your point, I think that the church could do a whole lot better at trying to not just have church, but be church. And that sounds like what you were trying to say, like not just trying to get people in the building, but really trying to like get inside of other people and really try to infiltrate the hearts of people that are in the areas around them.
I also don't desire to continue seeing leaders who associate God with one party or the other.
That's crazy,
right?
Yeah.
For to hear huge leaders with huge platforms say, if you vote for this party or this candidate,
that's crazy.
You are not aligned with like you ain't got God. You don't have a relationship.
Right.
And to make those types of statements is completely opposite of what I know Christ to be.
Yes.
Right. And I also think that by doing that, that continues to further create this wedge or this divide between humankind, mankind, and God. In as a whole, I find that very difficult when I hear leaders make that type of bold, brash statement that people can't vote a certain way and be Christians. Yeah, that's so crazy to me.
So as we close out and move, one thing I just want to say, and then we can close out from there. One is that somebody gonna win, right? And there's gonna be some people on either side who gonna feel away. Yeah. And so here goes the Christian, the pastoral statement that regardless of who wins, we already know like who's on the throne. And I know that's a churchy thing that people say all the time, that God's on the throne. But this is what I want to pass to you all. How do you personally reconcile your potential concerns, fears, whatever, with your faith in moments of like that, like political moments like this? Like, what is it? November 6th, the day after, whatever that day is, the day after the election, when you see the banner of who's won, do you have a sense of fear if it's not your candidate? Do you have a sense of relief if it is your candidate? Do you feel resolved regardless, knowing that you serve a sovereign God? Like how do you reconcile those? Because I'm sure that you guys have had elections before where because it's been like tennis matches with the parties, right? Right. So I'm sure there's been some election that has made you feel away. We say we don't put our faith in a candidate. You said no candidate is Jesus. You said that no pastor should be going, 10 toes down, like you the devil if you don't vote for this person. Right. So if we don't put that much energy and effort on the candidate, we can all agree that we have emotional responses to them. Humans. So how do you? Yeah, we're human. So like knowing that God is sovereign, knowing that there's nothing to overly worry about in that sense. How do you reconcile that on the day after?
I want y'all to know that if the person who I would like to win does not win, you will be visiting me in Barcelona. I'm out of here. No, I'm just kidding. But really, Barcelona's amazing.
Was it churros and chocolate?
I'm going to be eating all the food, like all the paella every day.
She'd rather run with the bulls
than deal with
in the wrong political climate. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of people feel like that.
Yeah. I know a lot of people are moving to Portugal.
Right.
No, thank you. But Pastor Tiff mentioned, or like we've survived and thrived, right? So like no matter what the outcome is. Like, I know that my God has a plan in all of it, whether it is to expose things that needs to be exposed, whether it is to put a period on chapters that need to be completely closed out and done for. Praise the Lord. I know that no matter what, like God tells us that his ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts, right? So like, I am not going to sit here and try and predict. I'm not going to sit here and try and condemn anyone, any decisions or the outcome. I'm going to instead like stand in faith, arm in arm with my brothers and my sisters in Christ and say, no matter what, like I'm surrounded by God's love and the love of the of my people. And whatever comes, we've survived worse. Like our ancestors have survived worse.
Come on,
we are their greatest dreams, something that they could never even imagine. That we would even have the opportunity to vote without fear of being attacked by dogs or being literally jailed and beaten and fire hoses turned on us. So like I feel like we're already winning just by like exercising our right to vote, and what God brought our people through in that time. That like no matter the outcome, like I did what I could do for the future that I want to see. And then the rest is in God's hands.
For sure.
That's good. How about you?
I think two things specifically. I think number one, no matter who ends up in the White House, I think we have to look within, right? I learned this from my godmom. Your emotions can never be trusted to drive who you are. And the reason is because our emotions are fickle. So we have to allow the Holy Spirit to lead us and guide us, especially in seasons of uncertainty. Because he's going to give us insight. He's going to give us a plan. He's going to give us strategy. The other thing, too, is I think that no matter who wins, even if it is your candidate that hops in that seat, we've got to start going with God to see, or asking God about what we have been called to be an answer to. You've been put on this earth in this particular lifetime to be an answer to something, right? And so even if you are, dealing or reeling with the pain or the, just the desperation after that moment, if it's somebody that you don't want to see in that space, I would say use that as motivation to say, okay, God, well, what have you called me to be an answer to in this season? I am purpose with legs. So if that's the case, then help me walk out my purpose in this season, with your help, with your support, with your guiding. Allow my emotions to be put in the back seat, and let's ride. Take me to where I'm supposed to go. I'll trust you. You're on my ship.
That's good.
I'm calling you up onto the deck to speak to this storm, to be at peace.
That's good, man. Hey, we can end right there. We can end right there. So we thank y'all so much for joining us. Real quick, shameless plug, shameless promo. We want to see you in service on first Sunday in August.
Please.
I believe it's I think it's Sunday the 4th. We are at Patrick Henry Elementary School, and we would love for you to come and join us. Also, like I said, if we have earned your share, make sure that you share it. And the last thing I'll say is that the Bible says, fear not, know that I am the Lord. And so we shall not be driven by fear, operate in faith always, and make sure that you're doing what God has called you to do, and stand 10 toes down on that. And
Remember
make sure that you vote, please, 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 please make sure that you vote. And maybe we should have like a vote party or something like that. We should do something. We should do something around that.
Registration at church.
Yeah,
or something.
We're gonna do something for sure to make it dope.
Yeah.
And if you just turned 18, look, you welcome to the party, and make sure that you participate in your first election.
Yeah.
So love y'all. Talk soon. God bless.
Peace.